Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bob Keyser. This is the Son of Man Urantia Project. Today's episode is Chapter 74, After Pentecost. The results of Peter's preaching on Pentecost decided the future plans and policies of the majority of the apostles' efforts to announce the gospel of the kingdom. Peter was the real founder of the Christian church. Paul carried the Christian message to the Gentiles, and the Greeks carried it to the whole Roman Empire. Although the priest-ridden and tradition-bound Hebrews, as a people, refused to accept either Jesus' gospel of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, or Peter and Paul's announcement of the resurrection and ascension of Jesus that became Christianity, the rest of the Roman Empire was found receptive to the evolving Christian teachings. Western civilization was at this time intellectual, weary of war, and thoroughly skeptical of all existing religions and universal philosophies. The people of the Western world, the beneficiaries of Greek culture, had a revered tradition of a great past. They could ponder their inheritance of great accomplishments in art, politics, philosophy, and literature. But with all of these achievements, they had no soul-satisfying religion. Their spiritual longings remained unsatisfied. Jesus' teachings, embraced in the Christian message, were suddenly thrust on this stage. A new way of living was presented to the hungry hearts of the Western people. This situation meant immediate conflict between the older religions and the new Christianized version of Jesus' message to the world. Such a conflict must result in either a decided victory for the new or for the old, or some degree of compromise. History shows that the struggle ended in compromise. Christianity dared to embrace too much for any one people to integrate in one or two generations. It was not a simple spiritual appeal, like as Jesus had presented to people's souls. Very early, it took a firm stance on art, law, sex, magic, morals, medicine, polygamy, education, literature, government, religious rituals, and to a limited degree, even slavery. Christianity became not merely a new religion, something all of the Roman Empire and all of the East were waiting for, but as a new order for human society. And as such, it quickly started the social moral clash of the ages. Jesus' ideals, as they were reinterpreted by Greek philosophy and socialized in Christianity, now boldly challenged the traditions of the human race embodied in the ethics, morality, and religions of Western civilization. At first, Christianity won as converts only the lower social and economic strata. But by the beginning of the 2nd century, the very best of the Greco-Roman culture was increasingly turning to this new order of Christian belief, this new concept of the purpose of living and the goal of existence. How did this new message of Jewish origin, which had almost failed in the land of its birth, so quickly and effectively capture the very best minds of the Roman Empire? The triumph of Christianity over the mystery cults and philosophical religions was due to 1. Organization. Paul was a great organizer, and his successors kept up the pace that he set. 2. Christianity was thoroughly Hellenized. It embraced the best in Greek philosophy as well as the cream of Hebrew theology. 3rd, but best of all, it contained a new and great ideal, the echo of Jesus' life bestowal and a reflection of his message of salvation for all humanity. Fourth, the Christian leaders were willing to make enough compromises with the Mithraic cult that the better half of its followers were won over to the Antioch cult. Fifth, in the same way, the next and later generations of Christian leaders made enough compromises with paganism that even the Roman Emperor, Constantine, was won to the new religion. But the Christians made a shrewd bargain with the pagans. While the Christians adopted the ritualistic pageantry of the pagan, they compelled the pagan to accept the Hellenized version of Pauline Christianity. They made a better bargain with the pagans than they did with the Mithraic cult. But even in that earlier compromise, they came off more like conquerors, in that they succeeded in eliminating the gross immoralities and other disgraceful practices of the Persian mystery. Wisely or unwisely, these early leaders of Christianity deliberately compromised the ideals of Jesus in an effort to save and further many of his ideas. And they were hugely successful. But mistake not, Jesus' compromised ideals are still latent in his gospel, and they will eventually assert their full power on the world. By this paganization of Christianity, the old order won many minor victories of a ritualistic nature, but the Christians gained domination in that, first, a new and enormously higher note in human morals was struck. Second, a new and greatly enlarged concept of God was given to the world. Third, the hope of immorality became a part of the assurance of a recognized religion. Fourth, Jesus of Nazareth was given to man's hungry soul. Many of the great truths taught by Jesus were almost lost in these early compromises, but they still slumber in this religion of paganized Christianity, which was in turn the Pauline version of the life and teachings of the Son of Man. And Christianity, even before it was paganized, was first thoroughly Hellenized. Christianity owes much, a huge amount, to the Greeks. It was a Greek from Egypt who bravely stood up at Nicaea and fearlessly challenged that assembly, and in so doing, stopped them from obscuring Jesus' actual nature so much that the real truth of his bestowal might have been lost to the world. This Greek's name was Athanasius, and but for his logic and eloquence, Arius' arguments would have won. The Greeks' influence. The Hellenization of Christianity started in earnest on that eventful day when the Apostle Paul stood before the council in Athens and told the Athenians about the unknown God. There, under the shadow of the Acropolis, this Roman citizen announced to these Greeks his version of the new religion that had its origin in the Jewish land of Galilee. And there was something strangely similar in Greek philosophy and many of Jesus' teachings. They had a common goal, both aimed at the emergence of the individual. The Greek at social and political emergence, Jesus at moral and spiritual emergence. The Greek taught intellectual liberalism leading to political freedom. Jesus taught spiritual liberalism leading to religious liberty. These two ideas put together constituted a new and mighty charter for human freedom. They presaged man's social, political, and spiritual liberty. Christianity came into existence and triumphed over all contending religions primarily because of two things. First, the Greeks were willing to borrow new and good ideas, even from the Jews. Second, Paul and his successors were willing but shrewd and sagacious compromisers. They were theological traders. At the time Paul stood up in Athens, preaching Christ and Him crucified, the Greeks were spiritually hungry. They were interested, questioning, and actually looking for spiritual truth. Never forget that at first the Romans fought Christianity, while the Greeks embraced it, and that it was the Greeks who literally forced the Romans to later accept this new religion, as it was then modified as a part of Greek culture. The Greek revered beauty, the Jew holiness, but both people loved truth. For centuries, the Greek had seriously thought and earnestly debated about all human problems, social, political, economic, and philosophical, except religion. Few Greeks had paid much attention to religion. They did not even take their own religion seriously. For centuries, the Jews had neglected these other fields of thought while they devoted their minds to religion. They took their religion very seriously, too seriously. As illuminated by the content of Jesus' message, the united product of the centuries of the thought of these two cultures now became the driving power of a new order of human society, and to a certain extent, of a new order of human religious practice. Greek culture had already penetrated the lands of the Western Mediterranean when Alexander spread his civilization over the Near Eastern world. The Greeks did very well with their religion and their politics, as long as they lived in small city-states. But when the Macedonian king dared to expand Greece into an empire, stretching it from the Adriatic to the Indus, trouble began. Greek art and philosophy were fully equal to the task of imperial expansion, but not so with Greek religion or political administration. After the Greek city-states had expanded into an empire, their rather unsophisticated gods seemed a little queer. The Greeks were really searching for one God, a greater and better God, when the Christianized version of the older Jewish religion came to them. The Greek Empire, as such, could not endure. Its cultural sway continued on, but it endured only after learning from the Romans in the West how to administer an empire, and after obtaining a religion whose one God possessed empire dignity from the East. In the first century after Jesus, Greek culture had already attained its highest levels. Its deterioration had begun. Learning was advancing, but genius was declining. It was at this very time that Jesus' ideals, which were partially embodied in Christianity, became part of salvaging Greek culture and learning. Alexander had charged on the east, bringing Greek civilization. Paul assaulted the west with the Christian version of Jesus' gospel. And wherever the Greek culture prevailed throughout the West, Greek Christianity took root. The Eastern version of Jesus' message, even though it remained truer to his teachings, continued to follow Abner's uncompromising attitude. It never progressed like did the Greek version, and it was eventually lost in the Islamic movement. The Roman influence. The Romans bodily took over Greek culture, replacing a government by lot with a government of representatives. And soon, this change favored Christianity, because Rome brought the whole Western world a new tolerance for strange people, religions, and languages. Much of the early persecutions of Christians in Rome were because of their unfortunate use of the term kingdom when they preached. The Romans were tolerant of any and all religions, but very resentful to anything that smelled of political rivalry. And so, When these early persecutions that were mostly due to misunderstanding died out, the field for religious propaganda was wide open. The Roman was interested in politics, and while he cared little for art or religion, he was unusually tolerant of both. Asian law was stern and arbitrary. Greek law was fluid and artistic. Roman law was dignified and bred respect. Roman education instilled an unheard of and emotionless loyalty. The early Romans were politically devoted. They were honest, zealous, and dedicated to their ideals, but without a religion worthy of the name. Small wonder that their Greek teachers were able to persuade them to accept Paul's Christianity. And these Romans were a great people. They could govern the West because they governed themselves. Such unparalleled honesty, devotion, and vigorous self-control was ideal soil for the reception and growth of Christianity. It was easy for these Greco-Romans to become just as spiritually devoted to an institutional church as they were politically devoted to the state. The Romans fought the church only when they feared it was competing with the state. Rome, having little native culture or national philosophy, took over Greek culture for its own and boldly adopted Christianity as its moral philosophy. Christianity became Rome's moral culture, but hardly its religion, at least not in the sense of being the individual experience of spiritual growth. True, indeed, many people did penetrate beneath the surface of all this state religion and found their souls nourished from the dormant truths of the now Hellenized and paganized Christianity. The Stoic and his sturdy appeal to nature and conscience had all the better prepared Rome for Jesus' reception, at least in an intellectual sense. The Roman was by nature and training a lawyer. He revered even nature's laws. And now, in Christianity, he saw nature's laws, the laws of God. A people that could produce Cyril and Virgil were ripe for Paul's Greek version of Christianity. And so, these Romanized Greeks forced both Jews and Christians to philosophize their religion, to coordinate its ideals, and to adapt religious practices to the existing current of life. And all of this was greatly helped by translating the Hebrew Scriptures and later the New Testament into Greek. The Greeks, in contrast with the Jews and many other people, had for a long time believed in some sort of immortality, or survival after death. And since this was the very heart of Jesus' teachings, it was certain that Christianity would make a strong appeal to them. A succession of Greek cultural and Roman political victories had consolidated the Mediterranean into one empire, with one culture and one language, and had made the Western world ready for one God. Judaism provided this God, but Judaism was not acceptable as a religion to these Romanized Greeks. Philo helped some people to reduce their objections, but Christianity revealed to them an even better concept of one God, and they readily embraced it. Under the Roman Empire, after the consolidation of Roman political rule and after the spread of Christianity, the Christians found themselves with one God and a great religious concept, but without an empire. The Greco-Romans found themselves with a great empire, but without a suitable God. The Christians accepted the empire adopted Christianity. The Roman provided a unity of political rule, the Greek a unity of culture and learning, Christianity a unity of religious thought and practice. Rome overcame the tradition of nationalism by imperial universalism, and for the first time in history made it possible for different races and nations to at least technically accept one religion. Christianity came into favor in Rome at a time when there was great contention between the Stoics' vigorous teachings and the mystery cult's promises of salvation. Christianity came with liberating power and refreshing comfort to a spiritually hungry people whose language had no word for unselfishness. What gave Christianity its greatest power was the way its believers lived lives of service, and even the way they died for their faith during the earlier times of dire persecution. The teachings regarding Jesus' love for children soon put an end to the widespread practice of exposing kids to death when they were not wanted, particularly baby girls. The format of early Christian worship was largely taken from the Jewish synagogue, modified by the Mithraic ritual, and later on embellished with pagan pageantry. The backbone of the early Christian church consisted of Greeks who had converted to Judaism and then became Christianized. The 2nd century after Jesus was the best time in all of the world's history for a good religion to make progress in the Western world. During the 1st century, Christianity had prepared itself by struggle and compromise to take root and spread rapidly. Christianity adopted the emperor. Later, he adopted Christianity. This was a great age for the spread of a new religion. There was religious liberty, travel was universal, and thought was unrestricted. The spiritual momentum of technically accepting Greek Christianity came to Rome too late to prevent the already begun moral decline, or to compensate for the already increasing and well-established racial deterioration. This new religion was a cultural necessity for Imperial Rome, and it is exceedingly unfortunate that it did not become a means of spiritual salvation in a larger sense. Even a good religion could not save a great empire from the sure results of standardization, physical plagues, the degradation of women, extreme focus on amusement, slavery and racial decadence, overtaxation and gross collection abuses, too much governmental control, people not participating in their governments, unbalanced trade with the East that drained away the gold, and a state church that became institutionalized nearly to the point of spiritual barrenness. Conditions, however, were not so bad at Alexandria. The early schools continued to hold much of Jesus' teachings, free from compromise. Pantaenus taught Clement and then went on to follow Nathanael in announcing Jesus' gospel in India. While some of Jesus' ideals were sacrificed in the building of Christianity, it should in all fairness be recorded that by the end of the 2nd century, practically all the great minds of the Greco-Roman world had become Christian. The triumph was approaching completion. And this Roman Empire lasted long enough to ensure the survival of Christianity even after the empire collapsed. But we have often speculated what would have happened in Rome and in the world if it had been Jesus' gospel of the kingdom that had been accepted instead of Greek Christianity. The European Dark Ages. The church, being an ally of politics and an addition to society, was doomed to share in the intellectual and spiritual decline of the so-called European Dark Ages. During this time, religion became more and more isolated, legalized, and ultra-disciplined. In a spiritual sense, Christianity was hibernating. Throughout this period, there existed, alongside this slumbering and secularized religion, a continuous stream of mysticism, fantastical spiritual experiences bordering on unreality and philosophically akin to pantheism. During these dark and despairing centuries, religion again became virtually second-hand. The individual was almost lost in the overshadowing authority and tradition of the church. A new spiritual menace arose in the creation of a galaxy of saints who were assumed to have special influence at the divine courts, and who, if effectively appealed to, would be able to intercede in a person's behalf before the gods. But Christianity was sufficiently paganized and socialized that, while it was impotent to hold back the coming dark ages, it was better prepared to survive this long period of moral darkness and spiritual stagnation. And it did persist on through the long night of Western civilization, and was still functioning as a moral influence in the world when the Renaissance dawned. The rehabilitation of Christianity, following the passing of the Dark Ages, resulted in bringing into existence many sects of Christian teaching, beliefs suited to special spiritual, emotional, and intellectual types of human personality. And many of these special Christian groups or religious families still persist at the time we are making this presentation. Christianity shows a history of having originated out of the unintended transformation of Jesus' religion into a religion about Jesus. Its history is one of paganization, fragmentation, Hellenization, secularization, institutionalization, moral hibernation, spiritual decadence, intellectual deterioration, threatened extinction, later rejuvenation, and more recently, relative rehabilitation. Such a pedigree reveals its inherent vitality and vast recuperative resources. And this same Christianity is now in the civilized Western world and stands face to face with a struggle for existence that is even more threatening than those eventful crises that have characterized its past battles for dominance. Religion is now confronted by the challenge of a new age of scientific minds and materialistic tendencies. In this gigantic struggle between the secular and the spiritual, Jesus' religion will eventually triumph. The modern problem. The 20th century has brought new problems for Christianity and all other religions to solve. The higher civilization climbs, the more important it is to seek first the realities of heaven in all of humanity's efforts to stabilize society and solve its material problems. Truth often becomes confusing and even misleading when it is isolated, segregated, dismembered, and analyzed too much. Living truth teaches the truth seeker correctly only when it is embraced in wholeness and as a living spiritual reality, not as a fact of material science or an inspiration of intervening art. Religion is the revelation to man of his divine and eternal destiny. Religion is a purely personal and spiritual experience and must forever be distinguished from man's other forms of thought, such as, first, man's logical attitude toward the things of material reality. Second, man's aesthetic appreciation of beauty contrasted with ugliness. Third, man's ethical recognition of social obligations and political duty. Fourth, Even man's sense of human morality is not, in and of itself, religious. Religion is designed to find those values in the universe that bring forth faith, trust, and assurance. Religion ends in worship. Religion discovers for the soul those supreme values that are in contrast with the relative values discovered by the mind. Such superhuman insight can be had only through genuine religious experience. A lasting social system without a morality predicated on spiritual realities can no more be maintained than could the solar system without gravity. Do not try to satisfy the curiosity or gratify all the latent adventure surging in the soul in one short life in the flesh. Be patient. Do not be tempted to indulge in a lawless plunge into cheap and sordid adventure. Harness your energies and bridle your passions. Be calm while you await the majestic unfolding of an endless career of progressive adventure and thrilling discovery. In confusion over man's origin, do not lose sight of his eternal destiny. Do not forget that Jesus loved even little children, and that he forever made clear the great worth of the human personality. As you view the world, remember that the black patches of evil that you see are shown against a white background of ultimate good. You do not view merely white patches of good that show up miserably against a black background of evil. When there is so much good truth to publish and announce, why should people dwell so much on the evil in the world just because it appears to be a fact? The beauties of the spiritual values of truth are more pleasurable and uplifting than is the phenomena of evil. In religion, Jesus advocated and followed the method of experience, even as modern science pursues the technique of experiment. We find God through the leadings of spiritual insight, but we approach this insight of the soul through the love of the beautiful, the pursuit of truth, loyalty to duty, and the worship of divine goodness. But of all of these values, love is the true guide to real insight. Materialism. Scientists have unintentionally brought humanity into a materialistic panic. They have started an unthinking run on the moral bank of the ages. But this bank of human experience has vast spiritual resources. It can stand the demands being made on it. Only unthinking people become panicky about the spiritual assets of the human race. When the materialistic, secular panic is over, Jesus' religion will not be found bankrupt. The spiritual bank of the kingdom of heaven will be paying out hope, faith, and moral security to all who draw on it in his name. No matter what the apparent conflict between materialism and Jesus' teachings may be, you can rest assured that in the ages to come, the Master's teachings will fully triumph. In reality, true religion cannot become involved in any controversy with science. It is in no way concerned with material things. Religion is simply indifferent to, but sympathetic with, science, while it supremely concerns itself with the scientist. The pursuit of mere knowledge without the attendant interpretation of wisdom and the spiritual insight of religious experience eventually leads to pessimism and human despair. A little knowledge is truly unsettling. At the time of this writing, the worst of the materialistic age is over. The day of a better understanding is already beginning to dawn. The higher minds of the scientific world are no longer wholly materialistic in their philosophy, but the rank and file of the people still lean in that direction as a result of former teachings. But this age of physical realism is only a passing episode in humanity's life on earth. Modern science has left true religion, Jesus' teachings as translated in the lives of his believers, untouched. All science has done is destroy the childlike illusions of the misinterpretations of life. Science is a quantitative experience. Religion is a qualitative experience as regards life on earth. Science deals with phenomena, religion with goals, values, and origins. To assign causes as an explanation of physical phenomena is to confess ignorance of ultimates, and in the end only leads the scientist straight back to the first great cause, the universal Father of Paradis. The violent swing from an age of miracles to an age of machines has proved altogether upsetting to humanity. The cleverness of the false philosophies of mechanism contradict their very mechanistic assertions. The fatalistic agility of the mind of a materialist forever disproves the assertions that the universe is a blind and purposeless energy phenomena. The mechanistic naturalism of some supposedly educated people and the thoughtless secularism of the person in the street are both exclusively concerned with things. They are barren of all real values, sanctions, and satisfactions of a spiritual nature, as well as being devoid of hope, faith, and eternal assurances. One of the great troubles with modern life is that people think they are too busy to find time for religious devotion and spiritual meditation. Materialism reduces a person to a soulless robot and makes the person merely a mathematical symbol, finding a helpless place in the mathematical formula of an unromantic and mechanistic universe. But where does all of this vast universe of mathematics come from without a master mathematician? Science may expound on the conservation of matter, but religion validates the conservation of people's souls. It concerns their experience with spiritual realities and eternal values. The materialistic sociologist of today surveys a community, makes a report on it, and leaves the people as he found them. 1900 years ago, unlearned Galileans watched Jesus giving his life as a spiritual contribution to man's inner experience, and then went out and turned the whole Roman Empire upside down. But religious leaders are making a great mistake when they try to call modern people to spiritual battle with the trumpet blast of the Middle Ages. Religion must provide itself with new and up-to-date slogans. Neither democracy or any other political remedy will take the place of spiritual progress. False religions may represent an evasion of reality, but Jesus in his gospel introduced people to the very entrance on an eternal reality of spiritual progression. To say that mind emerged from matter explains nothing. If the universe were merely a mechanism, the mind was not separate from matter, we would never have two differing interpretations of any observed phenomenon. The concepts of truth, beauty, and goodness are not inherent in either physics or chemistry. A machine cannot know, much less know truth, cherish goodness, or hunger for righteousness. Science may be physical, but the mind of the truth-discerning scientist is at once supermaterial. Matter knows not truth, neither can it love mercy or delight in spiritual realities. Moral convictions based on spiritual enlightenment and rooted in human experience are just as real and certain as mathematical deductions based on physical observations, but on another and higher level. If people were only machines, they would react more or less uniformly in a material universe. Individuality, much less personality, would not exist. The fact of the absolute mechanism of Paradis at the center of the universe of universes, in the presence of the unqualified will of the second source and center, makes it forever certain that determiners are not the exclusive law of the cosmos. Materialism is there, but it is not exclusive. Mechanism is there, but it is not unqualified. Determinism is there, but it is not alone. The finite universe of matter would eventually become uniform and deterministic, but for the combined presence of mind and spirit. The influence of the cosmic mind constantly injects spontaneity into even the material worlds. Freedom or initiative in any realm of existence is directly proportional to the degree of spiritual influence and cosmic mind control. That is, in human experience, the degree of actually doing the Father's will. And so, when you finally start out to find God, that is the conclusive proof that God has already found you. The sincere pursuit of truth, beauty, and goodness leads to God, and every scientific discovery demonstrates the existence of both freedom and uniformity in the universe. The discoverer was free to make the discovery. The thing discovered is real and apparently uniform, or else it could not have become known as a thing. The vulnerability of materialism. How foolish it is for the material-minded person to allow such vulnerable theories as those of a mechanistic universe to deprive them of the vast spiritual resources of the personal experience of true religion. Theories may quarrel with real spiritual faith, but facts never do. Better that science should be devoted to the destruction of superstition rather than attempting to overthrow religious faith, human belief in divine values and spiritual realities. Science should do for people materially what religion does for them spiritually, extend the horizon of life and enlarge their personality. True science can have no lasting quarrel with true religion. The scientific method is merely an intellectual yardstick to measure material adventures and physical achievements. But being material and wholly intellectual, it is utterly useless in the evaluation of spiritual realities and religious experiences. The inconsistency of the modern mechanist is, if this were merely a material universe and people were only a machine, such a person would be wholly unable to recognize themselves as such a machine, and likewise would such a machine human be wholly unconscious of the fact of existence of such a material universe. The materialistic dismay and despair of a mechanistic science has failed to recognize the fact of the spirit-indwelt mind of the scientist, whose very supermaterial insight expresses these mistaken and self-contradictory concepts of a materialistic universe. Paradise values of eternity and affinity, of truth, beauty, and goodness are concealed in the facts of the phenomena of the universes of time and space. But it requires the eye of faith in a spirit-born mortal to detect and see these spiritual values. The values and realities of spiritual progress are not a psychological projection, a mere glorified daydream of the material mind. Such things are the spiritual forecast of the indwelling adjuster, the Spirit of God living in the mind of people. And do not let your dabblings with the faintly glimpsed findings of relativity disturb your concepts of eternity and affinity of God. And in all your request for self-expression, do not make the mistake of failing to provide for adjuster expression, the manifestation of your real and better self. If this were only a material universe, material man would never be able to arrive at the idea of the mechanistic character of such an exclusively material existence. This very mechanistic concept of the universe is in itself a non-material phenomena of mind, and all mind is of non-material origin, no matter how thoroughly it may appear to be materially conditioned and mechanistically controlled. The partially evolved mind of humanity is not overendowed with wisdom and consistency. People's conceit often outruns their reason and escapes their logic. The very pessimism of the most pessimistic materialist is in and of itself sufficient proof that the universe of the pessimist is not wholly material. Both optimism and pessimism are reactions to ideas in a mind conscious of values as well as facts. If the universe were truly what the materialist regards it to be, a person as a human machine would then be devoid of all conscious recognition of that very fact. Without the consciousness of the concept of values in the spirit-born mind, the fact of universe materialism and mechanistic phenomena of a universe operation would be wholly unrecognizable by man. One machine cannot be conscious of the nature or value of another machine. A mechanistic philosophy of life and the universe cannot be scientific because science recognizes and deals only with facts and materials. Philosophy is inevitably super-scientific. Man is a material fact of nature, but his life is a phenomenon that transcends the material levels of nature in that it exhibits the control attributes of mind and the creative qualities of spirit. A person's sincere effort to become a mechanist represents the tragic phenomenon of a person's useless effort to commit moral and intellectual suicide, but they cannot do it. If the universe were only material and people only machines, there would be no science to embolden the scientists to postulate this mechanization of the universe. Machines cannot classify, measure, or evaluate themselves. Such a scientific piece of work could be executed only by some entity of supermachine status. If universe reality is only one vast machine and separate from it in order to recognize such a fact and become conscious of the insight of such an evaluation. If people are only machines, by what technique does a person come to believe or claim to know that the person is only a machine? The experience of self-conscious evaluation of oneself is never an attribute of a mere machine. The self-conscious and avowed mechanist is the best possible answer to mechanism. If materialism were a fact, there could be no self-conscious mechanist. It is also true that one must first be a moral person before one can perform immoral acts. The very claim of materialism implies a supermaterial consciousness that presumes to assert such dogmas. A mechanism might deteriorate, but it could never progress. Machines do not think, create, dream, aspire, idealize, hunger for truth, or thirst for righteousness. They do not motivate their lives with the passion to serve other machines and to choose as their goal of eternal progress the beautiful task of finding God and striving to be like Him. Machines are never moral, ethical, spiritual, aesthetic, emotional, or intellectual. Art proves that man is not mechanistic, but it does not prove that he is spiritually immoral. Art is mortal morontia, the intervening field between humanity, the material, and humanity, the spiritual. Poetry is an effort to escape from the material realities to spiritual realities. In a high civilization, art humanizes science, while in turn it is spiritualized by true religion, insight into spiritual and eternal values. Art represents the human and time-space evaluation of reality. Religion is the divine embrace of cosmic values and means eternal progression in spiritual ascension. The art of time is dangerous only when it becomes blind to the spirit standards of the divine patterns that eternity reflects as the reality shadows of time. True art is the effective manipulation of the material things of life. Religion is the ennobling transformation of the material facts of life, and it never ceases in its spiritual evaluation of art. How foolish to believe that a robot could conceive a philosophy of robotics, and how ridiculous that it should dare to form a concept of other fellow robots. Any scientific interpretation of the material universe is valueless unless it provides due recognition for the scientist. No appreciation of art is genuine unless it gives recognition to the artist. No evaluation of morals is worthwhile unless it includes the moralist. No recognition of philosophy is edifying if it ignores the philosopher. And religion cannot exist without the real experience of the religionist who, in and through this very experience, is seeking to find God and to know Him. In the same way, the universe of universes is without significance if separate from the I Am, the infinite God who made it, and unceasingly manages it. Mechanists, humanists, tend to drift with the material currents. Idealists and spiritualists dare to use their oars with vigor and intelligence to modify the apparently material course of the energy streams. Science lives by the mathematics of the mind. Music expresses the tempo of the emotions. Religion is the spiritual rhythm of the soul in time-space harmony with the higher and eternal melody of infinity. Religious experience is something in human life that is truly super-mathematical. In language, an alphabet represents the mechanism of materialism, while the words expressive of the meaning of 1,000 thoughts, grand ideas, and noble ideals, of love and hate, courage and cowardice, represent the mind defined by both material and spiritual law, directed by the will of the personality and limited by the inherent situational endowment. The universe is not like the laws, mechanisms, and uniformities that the scientist discovers and that he comes to regard as science, but rather like the curious, thinking, choosing, creative, combining, and discriminating scientist who thus observes universe phenomena and classifies the mathematical facts inherent in the mechanistic phases of the material side of creation. Neither is the universe like the art of the artist, but rather like the striving, dreaming, aspiring, and advancing artist who seeks to transcend the world of material things in an effort to achieve a spiritual goal. The scientist, not science, perceives the reality of an evolving and advancing universe of energy and matter. The artist, not art, demonstrates the existence of the transient morontia world intervening between material existence and spiritual liberty. The religionist, not religion, proves the existence of the spirit realities and divine values that are to be encountered in the progress of eternity. Secular totalitarianism. But even after materialism and mechanism have been more or less vanquished, the devastating influence of 20th century secularism is still blight with the spiritual experience of millions of unsuspecting souls. Modern secularism has been fostered by two worldwide influences. The father of secularism was the narrow-minded and godless attitude of 19th and 20th century so-called science, the science of atheism. The mother of modern secularism was the totalitarian medieval Christian church. Secularism had its start as a rising protest against the almost complete domination of Western civilization by the institutionalized Christian church. At the time of this revelation, the prevailing intellectual and philosophical climate of both European and American life is decidedly secular, humanistic. For 300 years, Western thinking has been progressively secularized. Religion has become more and more a nominal influence, largely a ritualistic exercise. The majority of professed Christians of Western civilization are, unknowingly, actually secularists. It required a great power, a mighty influence, to free the living and thinking of the West from the crushing grasp of totalitarian Christian domination. Secularism did break the bonds of church control, and now it in turn threatens to establish a new and godless type of mastery over the hearts and minds of modern people. The tyrannical and dictatorial political state is a direct offspring of scientific materialism and philosophical secularism. Secularism no sooner frees people from the domination of the institutionalized church than it sells the person into slavish bondage to the totalitarian state. Secularism frees people from Christian slavery, only to betray them to the tyranny of economic and political slavery. Materialism denies God. Secularism simply ignores him. At least that was the earlier attitude. More recently, secularism has assumed a more militant attitude, assuming to take the place of the religion whose totalitarian bondage at one time resisted. 20th century secularism tends to support the idea that man does not need God. But beware, this godless philosophy of human society will lead only to war, unrest, animosity, unhappiness, and worldwide disaster. Secularism can never bring peace to humanity. Nothing can take the place of God in human society. But mark you well, do not be quick to surrender the beneficial gains of the secular revolt from Christian tyranny. Western civilization today enjoys many liberties and satisfactions as a result of the secular revolt. The great mistake of secularism was this: in revolting against the almost total control of life by religious authority, and after being liberated from such Christian tyranny, the secularists went on to institute a revolt against God himself, sometimes hidden and sometimes out in the open. To the secular revolt, you owe the amazing creativity of American industrialism and the unprecedented material progress of Western civilization. And because the secular revolt went too far and lost sight of God and true religion, there also followed the unlooked-for harvest of world wars and international chaos. It is not necessary to sacrifice faith in God in order to enjoy the blessings of the modern secular revolt: tolerance, social service, civil liberties, and democratic government. It was not necessary to antagonize true religion in order to promote science and advance education. But secularism is not the sole parent of all these recent gains in the expansion of living. Behind the gains of the 20th century are not only science and secularism, but also the unrecognized and unacknowledged spiritual workings of the life and teaching of Jesus of Nazareth. Without God, without religion, scientific secularism can never coordinate its forces or harmonize its divergent races, interests, and nationalisms. This secularistic human society, even with its unparalleled materialistic achievement, is slowly disintegrating. The chief cohesive force resisting this disintegration of antagonism is nationalism, and nationalism is the chief barrier to world peace. The inherent weakness of secularism is that it discards ethics and religion for politics and power. You simply cannot establish the brotherhood of humanity while ignoring or denying the fatherhood of God. Secular social and political optimism is an illusion. Without God, neither freedom and liberty nor wealth and property will lead to peace. The complete secularization of society, science, industry, and education can only lead to disaster. During the first third of the 20th century, Urantians killed more human beings than were killed during the entire Christian dispensation up to that time. And this is only the beginning of the dire harvest of secularism and materialism. Still, more terrible destruction is yet to come. Christianity's problem. Do not overlook the value of your spiritual heritage, the river of truth running down through the centuries, even to the barren times of a secular and materialistic age. In all your worthy efforts to rid yourselves of the superstitions of the past, make sure that you hold fast to the eternal truth. But be patient. When the present superstitious revolt is over, the truths of Jesus' gospel will persist to gloriously illuminate a new and better way. But paganized and socialized Christianity needs a new contact with Jesus' uncompromising teaching. It languishes for lack of a new vision of the Master's life on earth. A new and fuller revelation of Jesus' religion is destined to conquer an empire of materialistic secularism and to overthrow the world influence of mechanistic naturalism. Urantia is now quivering on the very brink of one of its most amazing and enthralling epochs of moral quickening, social readjustment, and spiritual enlightenment. Jesus' teachings, even when greatly modified, survived the mystery cults of their birth time, the ignorance and superstition of the Dark Ages, and are even now slowly triumphing over the mechanism, secularism, and materialism of the 20th century. And such times of great testing and threatened defeat are always times of great revelation. Religion needs new leaders, spiritual men and women who will dare to depend solely on Jesus and his incomparable teachings. If Christianity persists in neglecting its spiritual mission while it continues to busy itself with social and material problems, the spiritual renaissance must wait the coming of these new teachers of Jesus' religion, who will be exclusively devoted to the spiritual regeneration of men. And then these spirit-born souls will quickly supply the leadership and inspiration needed for the moral, social, economic, and political reorganization of the world. The modern age will refuse to accept a religion that is inconsistent with facts and out of harmony with its highest conceptions of truth, beauty, and goodness. The hour is striking for a rediscovery of the true and original foundations of present-day, distorted, and compromised Christianity, the real life and teachings of Jesus. Primitive people lived a life of superstitious bondage to religious fear. Modern, civilized people dread the thought of falling under the dominance of strong religious convictions. Thinking people have always feared to be held by a religion. When a strong and moving religion threatens to dominate a person, that person always tries to rationalize, traditionalize, and institutionalize it in the hope of gaining control over it. In such a way, even a revealed religion becomes made and dominated by people. Modern men and women of intelligence evade Jesus' religion because of their fears of what it will do to them and with them. And all such fears are well-founded. Jesus' religion does, indeed, dominate and transform its believers, demanding that people dedicate their lives to seeking for a knowledge of the will of the Father in heaven, and requiring that the energies of daily living be dedicated to the unselfish service of the brotherhood of humanity. Selfish men and women simply do not pay such a price for even the greatest spiritual treasure ever offered to humanity. Only when people have become sufficiently disillusioned by the sad disappointments linked to the foolish and deceptive pursuits of selfishness, and after they discover the barrenness of formalized religion, will people be ready to turn wholeheartedly to the gospel of the kingdom, the religion of Jesus of Nazareth. The world needs more first-hand religion. Even Christianity, the best of the religions of the 20th century, is not only a religion about Jesus, but one that people experience secondhand. They take their religion completely as given to them by the religious leaders. What an awakening the world would experience if it could only see Jesus as he lived on earth and know firsthand his life-giving teachings. Descriptive words of things beautiful cannot thrill like the sight of them. Neither can holy words inspire men's souls like the experience of knowing the presence of God. But keen faith will always keep the door of hope in man's soul open to receive the eternal realities of the worlds beyond. Christianity has dared to lower its ideals before the challenge of human greed, war madness, and the lust for power. But Jesus' religion stands as a pure and unequaled spiritual summons, calling the best that there is in humanity to rise above all of these legacies of animal evolution and by grace attain the moral heights of true human destiny. Christianity is threatened by slow death from formalism, over-organization, intellectualism, and other non-spiritual trends. The modern Christian church is not such a brotherhood of dynamic believers like Jesus continuously commissioned to bring about the spiritual transformation of successive generations of humanity. So-called Christianity has become a social and cultural movement, as well as a religious belief and practice. The stream of modern Christianity drains many an ancient pagan swamp and many a barbarian morass. Many old cultural watersheds drain into this present-day cultural stream, as well as the high Galilean tablelands that are supposed to be its exclusive source. The future. Christianity has indeed done a great service for this world, but what is most needed now is Jesus. The world needs to see Jesus living again on earth in the experience of spirit-born mortals who effectively reveal the Master to all people. It is futile to talk about a revival of primitive Christianity. You must go forward from where you find yourselves. Modern culture must become spiritually baptized with a new revelation of Jesus' life and illuminated with a new understanding of his gospel of eternal salvation. And when Jesus becomes thus lifted up, he will draw all people to him. Jesus' disciples should be more than conquerors. They should be overflowing sources of inspiration and enhanced living to all people. Religion is only an exalted humanism until it is made divine by the discovery of the presence of God in personal experience. The beauty, the humanity and divinity, the simplicity and uniqueness of Jesus' life on earth present such a striking and appealing picture of man saving and God revealing that the theologians and philosophers of all time should be effectively restrained from daring to form creeds or create theological systems of spiritual bondage out of such a divine gift of God in human form. In Jesus, the universe produced a mortal man in whom the spirit of love triumphed over the material handicaps of time and overcame the fact of physical origin. Always bear in mind, God and men need each other. They are mutually necessary to the full and final attainment of eternal personality experience in the divine destiny of universe finality. The kingdom of God is in you was probably the greatest announcement that Jesus ever made, next to the declaration that his Father is a living and loving Spirit. In winning souls for the Master, it is not the first mile of duty, compulsion, or convention that will transform a person, but rather the second mile of free service and liberty-loving devotion that causes Jesus' believers to grasp his brother in love and sweep him on under the spiritual guidance to the higher and divine goal of mortal existence. Christianity now willingly goes the first mile, but humanity languishes and stumbles along in moral darkness because there are so few genuine second milers, so few supposed followers of Jesus who really live and love as he taught his disciples to live and love and serve. The call to the adventure of building a new and transformed human society by means of the spiritual rebirth of Jesus' brotherhood of the kingdom should thrill all who believe in him like people have not been stirred since the days when they walked about on earth as his friends in the flesh. No social system or political regime that denies the reality of God can contribute in any constructive and lasting manner to the advancement of human civilization. But Christianity, as it is subdivided and secularized today, presents the greatest single obstacle to its further advancement. This is especially true concerning the Asian countries. Too much attention to church dogma is at once and forever incompatible with that living faith, growing spirit, and first-hand experience of the faith comrades of Jesus in the brotherhood of humanity in the spiritual association of the kingdom of heaven. The praiseworthy desire to preserve traditions of past achievement often leads to the defense of outgrown systems of worship. The well-meant desire to foster ancient thought systems effectually prevents the sponsoring of new and adequate means and methods designed to satisfy the spiritual longings of the expanding and advancing minds of modern people. Likewise, the Christian churches of the 20th century stand as great, but completely unconscious, obstacles to the immediate advancement of the real gospel, the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. Many earnest people who would gladly yield loyalty to the gospel, the Jesus of the gospel, find it very difficult to enthusiastically support a church that exhibits so little of the spirit of his life and teachings, and that they have been wrongly taught that he founded. Jesus did not found the so-called Christian church, but he has, in every manner consistent with his nature, fostered it to the best example of his life's work on earth. If the Christian church would only dare to adopt the Master's program, thousands of apparently indifferent young people would rush forward to enlist in such a spiritual undertaking, and they would not hesitate to go all the way through with this great adventure. Christianity is seriously confronted with the doom embodied in one of its own slogans: "A house divided against itself cannot stand." The non-Christian world will hardly submit to a sect-divided Christianity. The living Jesus is the only hope of a possible unification of Christianity. The true church, the Jesus Brotherhood, is invisible, spiritual, and is characterized by unity, not necessarily by uniformity. Uniformity is the earmark of the physical world of mechanistic nature. Spiritual unity is the fruit of faith, union with the living Jesus. The visible church should refuse to any longer handicap the progress of the invisible and spiritual brotherhood of the kingdom of God. And this brotherhood is designed to become a living organism in contrast to an institutionalized social organization. It may well utilize such social organizations, but it must not be replaced by them. But the Christianity of even the 20th century must not be despised. It is the product of the combined moral genius of the God-knowing people of many races during many ages, and it has truly been one of the greatest powers for good on earth, and therefore no person should lightly regard it, even with its inherent and acquired defects. Christianity still works to move the minds of reflective people with mighty moral emotions. But there is no excuse for the involvement of the church in politics and commerce. Such unholy alliances are a flagrant betrayal of the Master, and the genuine lovers of truth will be slow to forget that this powerful institutionalized church has often dared to smother newborn faith and persecute truth-bearers who chanced to appear in unorthodox ways. It is all too true that such a church would not have survived unless there had been people in the world who preferred such a style of worship. Many spiritually lazy souls crave an ancient and authoritative religion of ritual and sacred traditions. Human evolution and spiritual progress are hardly sufficient to enable all people to dispense with religious authority. And the invisible brotherhood of the kingdom may well include these family groups of various social and temperamental classes, if they are only willing to truly become Spirit-led sons of God. But in this brotherhood of Jesus, there is no place for religious rivalry, group bitterness, or assertions of moral superiority or spiritual infallibility. These various groupings of Christians may serve to accommodate many different types of would-be believers among the various people of Western civilization. But such a division of Christianity presents a grave weakness when it attempts to carry the gospel of Jesus to Asian people. These races do not yet understand that there is a religion of Jesus, separate and somewhat apart from Christianity, which has more and more become a religion about Jesus. The great hope of Urantia lies in the possibility of a new revelation of Jesus with a new and enlarged presentation of his saving message, which would spiritually unite the many families of his present-day professed followers in loving service. Even secular education could help in this great spiritual renaissance if it would pay more attention to the work of teaching young people how to plan their lives and develop their characters. The purpose of all education should be to foster and further the supreme purpose of life, the development of a majestic and well-balanced personality. There is great need for the teaching of moral discipline in the place of so much self-gratification. On such a foundation, religion may contribute to its spiritual incentive to the enrichment and enlargement of mortal life, even to the security and enhancement of life eternal. Christianity is an improvised religion, and because of that, it must operate in low gear. High gear, spiritual performances must wait the new revelation. and the more general acceptance of the real religion of Jesus. But Christianity is a mighty religion, seeing that the commonplace disciples of a crucified carpenter set in motion those teachings that conquered the Roman world in 300 years, and then went on to triumph over the barbarians who overthrew Rome. This same Christianity conquered, absorbed, and uplifted the whole stream of Hebrew theology and Greek philosophy. And then, when this Christian religion became comatose for more than 1,000 years as a result of an overdose of paganism and mysteries, it resurrected itself and virtually reconquered the whole Western world. Christianity contains enough of Jesus' teachings to immortalize it. If Christianity could only grasp more of Jesus' teachings, it could do so much more in helping modern people to solve their new and increasingly complex problems. Christianity suffers under a great handicap because it has become identified in the minds of all the world as a part of the social system, industrial life, and moral standards of Western civilization. And in that way, Christianity has unwittingly appeared to sponsor a society that staggers under the guilt of tolerating science without idealism, politics without principles, wealth without work, pleasure without restraint, knowledge without character, power without conscience, and industry without morality. The hope of modern Christianity is that it will cease to sponsor the social systems and industrial policies of Western civilization, while it humbly bows itself before the cross it so valiantly praises, there to learn again from Jesus of Nazareth the greatest truths mortals can ever hear, the living gospel of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of humanity. Okay, everyone, that's it for chapter 74. The last chapter, chapter 75, is coming up tomorrow. I think that title is The Faith of Jesus. Defend liberty. Protect them kids. Get out there and serve somebody for nothing more or less than the sake of God. We need it. Godspeed, everybody. This is Bobby Keyser out here.